Newport is well known for its ability to take you back in time, for its scenic vistas and its beautiful secret gardens. We're here at the Point section of Newport, the city by the sea, to explore one of its hidden treasures, Third and Elm Press, and its artisan Ilse Nesbit, who has been here since 1965, producing her beautiful hand-carved, hand-set books, cards, and prints. And here we are in the inspiration for some of that, nature and her beautiful secret garden at Third and Elm. Hi Elsa, how are you? So lovely to be here this afternoon. And I can see from looking around that we are in the heart of your studio workspace. This is an absolutely amazing treasure here in Newport. So I'd love you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and the history of Third and Elm Press.
Thank you. We started here in 1965. I had taught at the School of Design in Providence for 5 years, typography and book design, largely, actually not woodcutting, that was on the side. And when I quit the job there, I lost it actually, to be honest. My husband started working at what is now UMass Dartmouth. We were looking for a place for a shop, and a friend who had bought some dilapidated houses here on the Point, which was at that time just crawling out from having been a slum, he had this shop, and so it invited itself to be used, and that's where we started. So this had been before as a carpenter. We had to bring everything in here. And with the letterpress. In those days, letterpress printing, which is what we do, was not quite as old-fashioned as it is now. Now, I mean, they say it's a dying art, you might almost say it's a dead art. But as with all these things, it has to be almost dead to be revived again. And but I had from the beginning not the idea of doing a big place, you know, and make a lot of money and enlarge and hire many people. I wanted it for myself and to do what I like to do. And woodcut was a large part of it, and handset type for the books. And so
now I understand that you were raised in Germany and
that's
studied
right.
there first.
Actually, I was raised in
Japan.
Japan.
Born in Germany, raised in Japan. So you do have a lot of Japanese influence.
Yeah, yes. I was too young to do actually study art in Japan myself. I was 14 when we left, but my mother studied Japanese brush painting and the flower arrangement, and so I grew up with that around me, and actually saw it elsewhere, the Japanese composition. And many people who haven't stopped to look at my biography, looking at the work, said, it looks Japanese. it
does have that flavor.
Yeah, it has that Japanese composition.
Yeah, and
the
that
non-symmetrical coming out of a corner, and yeah.
And it's a beautiful surprise. It's a beautiful surprise, and it works well with the hand-carved woodcuts and the hand-set linotype. So I would like to invite you to show us a little bit about the process. I'm sure our audience would be interested in how you make the paper and the woodcuts and what you use these beautiful presses for.
Yes. Where would you like to start, with the paper, because that's the first thing, or with, I did not do that from the first, naturally.
Well, let's start with the paper, okay, and we'll move over to that part of your workshop. So Ilse, why don't you take us through the paper making process as you've developed it, and explain a little bit of how it's used in your work.
I started making paper about 20 years ago, partly on the ground that a lot of my woodcuts are small images, or small or large, in an open area. They don't go filling the corners, woodcuts traditionally do. So there was a lot of paper space around it, and it invited itself to make that paper part of the picture, as the Strathmore slogan goes. And to do the thing. And then they had a paper workshop one Saturday morning at the Newport Art Museum. We made kind of cookie sheet type paper, sticking it on the window panes to dry. Yeah. But it did have the effect that I realized it can be done. Because Don Hunter, that famous paper man who went all over the world selling paper, he says very emphatically, because he knows how enticing it is, that no, you cannot do it at home, but you can. And but I learned very quickly that you do not make decent paper out of the lint of your dryer. Aside
Oh,
from
no,
having
really?
a dryer, that's what they
I'm
tell
so
you.
disappointed. I thought I could.
And it's just it's second hand. It's fancy,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
But people have done it. And so I ended up with the Japanese fiber. Yeah, my son gave me a book then that had been in November, this course. And at Christmas he gave me a book on Japanese paper making, which is a wonderful book, Timothy Barrett, who explained really how you could do it, how it was done, and how you could modify the Japanese technique. And so following that, I ended up doing the Japanese way rather than the European way, where you really need a beater, which I don't. I don't even have a mixer. And cotton. And, so I start with the fiber. This is from the mulberry tree, the kozo. This is what I buy. I don't go quite so far. If I had a room in my yard, I might be tempted to grow a mulberry tree, but there's no space for that. This is very dry because I've had that for this purpose lying here in the shop for a number of years. So this gets soaked overnight and then cooked for a couple of hours in soda ash, and then it gets really like matted hair.
And the fibers sort of come apart.
Yeah, you have to kind of cook it until you can pull it apart. And then it gets put here on the stone table. And this tool, the Japanese use a wooden board. But this tool is very funny. It is actually still today being sold for letterpress printing to tap down your type with a wooden, you have a wooden block and you tap down the tab so that it's level. But I always use my type key for it. I wouldn't bother having an extra tool line for this. But so I had one inherited from, I think, Franklin Printing when they closed. And I could buy a second one for my help. And this was perfect. I beat the fiber here on this table, and it goes flying. You can see pieces of. When it's wet, you don't see it. It's dry. It's hard to remove.
Yeah.
So that's why everything else.
It lends to the charm of the space. Believe me.
And then I have here in the back a large vat into which the stuff is put. There's a mixer, chemical mixture. I don't quite make it out of the wood, but one could classically do that. Holds the fiber more.
Like a sizing.
It makes it, it makes it actually more like, what do they call it? It's kind of like snot.
Like a sticky,
like that.
Like mucilage.
Yeah,
mucilage.
it makes the water thicker.
Right.
Like a so that the fiber floats. And then this is the mold. It consists of 3 pieces. This is the actual mold. It still is stuff on the old. I found it's generally easier to clean it when I start making the next batch of paper rather than in between.
Yeah, it's like a screen.
And this is the decal that goes over it. That because otherwise, when you lift it off, it would just run off it.
Right.
That holds it. And then this is a Japanese edition. They call it a su. There's no, since the Western world doesn't use such a thing, there's no Western word for it. That gets actually put in between. And so this thing goes into the vat.
Little mold sandwich.
And lift it out, and you have to be careful that it's level, because otherwise paper thick on one end and then the other. And then you take the decal off. It's still all dropping all there over the vat. You take this off, and then I have actually, I don't think I need to get that now. I have wooden boards under which, this thing just gets flipped over and rubbed on, and this comes off and the paper stays behind.
Okay. All right. So you don't peel it off, you just sort of lay it off, and all in one piece, and it dries.
It attaches itself to the wooden board. Do you want me to get a wooden board?
No.
I have a stack of them. And then it gets dried outside in the street, so I can make paper only on sunny days. And then people come in and say, "What's that?"
What's beautiful about the paper, I don't know if our audience can see it, maybe with this piece, is that it has such wonderful texture and it's so organic.
It's purposely done, some leaves in it and some
You've got leaves, you've got flowers, bark. I mean, and it has such a beautiful texture.
Yeah.
And is very, very organic. And then in some cases, like this beautiful piece, it's almost like a cloud. It's very soft.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of variety with your papers.
Yes, yes.
And you use them primarily for your prints?
For the prints, because naturally this process, once I have it going, the actual pulling out of the vat is very fast. But still, it's I could not make a big production in it, so I made probably 50 in a session or so. So I use it for the larger woodcuts.
For the larger woodcuts.
And the smaller ones, there are some small. This one here is also my paper.
All right.
You know the little scrap pieces that are used for
Yeah.
the little ones, and up there behind you the Queen Anne's. This is also that.
So this is a really beautiful process. So we start with the paper, and you know, I guess on a Sunday afternoon, some of our audience could wander through the point, and on a sunny Sunday afternoon, and see you at work doing your work, you doing the paper. So we'll go on to the next part of this wonderful process, which is making the wood blocks,
making the wood
and
blocks,
setting the type.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Ilse, could you explain a little bit about the process of wood cutting and how you use it to create your beautiful work?
Yeah, woodcut is actually a fairly old way of printing. They did it before any kind of reproduction methods. This was the one way to show drawings in a method that could be printed together with type, because it's both letterpress, both ways printing. So woodcut has always since then been looked a little down on by art historians, thinking of that's just reproduction. They just cut away what they don't want. They cut around their drawing. But no, if you think of it, nobody would consider Michelangelo a lesser artist because he cut away what he didn't want on his Moses, compared with Leonardo, who painted what he wanted on it. And it's a deductive method. It's closer to sculpture really than graphic design, where it is put in. And naturally, because it was a reproductive method, it was always done very neat and very clean. You see still modern woodcuts, I mean contemporary, let's say, 20th century woodcuts. Everything cut completely like a drawing. I don't believe in that. I mean, I can do that if I have to, but I do want to show the wood, and that it is cut out of wood. There's a certain roughness I want to keep. And in many prints I even show particularly the wood in the grain, like the one upstairs where you can see the rain and the thing is actually
the grain of the wood?
No, it's the grind mark of the sawmill.
Oh, really?
Those angles.
Oh, that's
the
fantastic.
grain of the wood is the other part.
So sometimes when you choose the wood, you might choose it
Yes.
for an image based on the kind of grain it might have, and you could translate
Exactly.
that into a
Yes.
rock
Yes.
or rain or clouds.
Makes it difficult at times to find the right piece of wood, but then fascinating when you have it.
And is this primarily a hardwood or a softer wood like pine?
It
Or
depends. Actually, principally, I try to use the softest wood I can. Because if it's hardwood, you just stand there grinding away and don't have the sweep.
Yeah, yeah.
While on the other hand, if the wood is too coarse, it will fall out for the detail. This is poplar wood. That's an in-between wood. Although it was so fresh and so tough, I put it in the oven for an hour to try it out a bit. I've never done that before.
But it's one of the beauties, I think, of your process is the fact that you leave some of the grain and some of the tool marks
that
in
you
the
can,
print,
exactly.
which is
That's
beautiful.
the idea. Yeah, that you can see kind of how it's done, and people still don't have any idea what woodcuts are. And even though I have it lying there, and I say on the back of my cards printed from the blog, I don't think anybody who hasn't done it understands what that means.
Well, now hopefully they'll understand exactly the process we go through.
Because that's what and that's how I actually got into woodcuts, because it is the same thing with type, and you can print them together. And so
let's see how we put this all together, from the paper to the wood block, and then the printing process itself, and some of these beautiful antique presses that you have here at Third and Elm. So Ilse, I read on your website that the press has a motto taken from the German poet Goethe. And it reads, "Whoever works joyfully and enjoys what has been done is fortunate." So it sounds like that's a very personal statement about the kind of work you do here at Third and Elm. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that as you show us part of the woodblock process.
Sure. As actually the thing is almost the other way around. I enjoy what I'm doing, and then when I saw that quote by Goethe, I thought that's exactly what fits us. And this is the old press that in principle is what Gutenberg used. Only naturally Gutenberg was very primitive. It was made out of wood and had just one crank like a spindle. But the idea of putting a block, your text, your image down, piece of paper on top, write it under, pull the lever, is the same. Also what Franklin used.
So let's just get a little bit closer into this process, okay?
This press, which has a patent from 1830, was presumably used for newspapers, judging from the size of it. And they had a different mechanism that goes up here on this side with a fusket on top, where the paper was put and that's flipped down over it. I don't use that because it is too complicated and I cannot get at the block, which I always have to do rub by hand. And everything that I print here has to be really dead center in the press, because the press has only one center pressure, and if something is too far in the corner, the whole thing might just jump apart. And I will show now how it works. We have to ink the block, which has been put in the center. I have actually scratched a cross in here so that I can see where I am. And we put a piece of paper on top. I just drop this on and then some cardboard. You have to be careful not to slide it. It winds under. Be careful not to bang it. Pull the lever until I feel the pressure under it. Out it comes. And here comes the personal part. See, if there is areas that I want darker or that are not dark enough, I rub them by hand.
So Ilse, I see you have another antique press. Where does this date from?
This is comparably recent.
Oh, really?
What's the other one? That's 1897.
Ah.
So,
and you use this, I understand, to make your cards.
for the cards.
A little bit more mass production.
Yes.
Why don't you take us through how it works?
Yeah, this is what they would call a hand-fed electric press. It runs electrically, it inks automatically and speeds, but I have to put the paper in and take it out by hand, and I can show how that is done. And you turn the press on. The rollers go over the form, pick up the ink from the pan, and where I want to print, I pull the lever. And I take out the paper with one hand, put it in with the other, and pull the lever.
And how many cards can you do?
One at a time.
One at a time, but this is more your mass production.
Yeah.
Personalized mass production.
Yes, and I can print multicolor with this very carefully. All these cards are done that way, and I can show you the principle. It's just done with Make Ready, my own invention. And yeah, this is the press I use for the cards or anything in larger numbers. It doesn't take large prints because it needs the space, and it is not that strong. The other one is as strong as I can manage to yank. And is this enough?
Yes, that's wonderful. That's
and while by comparison, the press that I just showed works for the large woodcuts, and I rub them by hand mostly. You can go over it with your fingers and you can feel the difference. That gets put under the paper, and then this is what comes out.
Oh, wow.
And I do the same with the red. Here's the red. And the yellow is not so much because the yellow is not strong enough to carry its own image. See, there's a different version of the blue. And, but this is then what comes out.
So I'd love to take people upstairs to your gallery and have them take a look at some of your beautiful work. We're upstairs in this absolutely beautiful and intimate gallery space at 3rd and Elm Press with Ilse Nesbit. And Ilse, this is a gorgeous space for people to just come and browse and take a look at some of your prints and really get to know some of your beautiful books. We didn't talk downstairs about your typesetting process, but I noticed that all of your books are hand done. So we have these, hand set type.
No,
In many cases,
this is woodcut.
this is woodcut.
That's woodcut, yeah.
The type is woodcut.
Yeah, the whole thing. It's one single block. Each
Unbelievable!
page
That
one
is
block.
absolutely beautiful.
And the second one. But there are also texts done in type. This one has woodcuts,
Ah, you
but
see
the
the
text
difference.
is set in type.
I see the difference.
Yeah.
So this is beautiful. I really want to invite people to come down here and just sit for a bit, take a look at all these beautiful pieces, and really get to know your work more intimately. I understand you have some of your favorite pieces up here. Maybe you want to point them out for the camera, and we'll take a moment to do that. So Ilse, I know it's hard for a mother to choose among her favorite children, but we have a couple of your favorite pieces here, and why don't you talk a little bit about them for our audience?
The upper one in the corner is Fogland. That's locals will know the area in Little Compton, and that is rather freely taken. But it is one of those pieces where the wood grain is showing, and it's freely done with the pieces of the joinery, and then it's a lot of inking and piecing it together. And so I like it.
Well, what's nice about this corner is these illustrate a little bit of the processes we were talking about downstairs, like utilizing the wood grain, and over here the color.
And yes, it's a piece of wood.
And this is another very beautiful and very interesting picture that sort of brings in some of the Japanese influence of your childhood. Can you talk a little about, it's called Enoshima?
That's an island in Japan, and it is actually part of my childhood. The first several summers in Japan we spent in Kamakura, which is right near Enoshima, this little island, which consists out of several temples. Almost all there is there. And when I came back to Japan in '99, I went there and I saw this and then made a woodcut out of it. So it is somewhat of a magic place, seeing through that large torii, the little village.
And certainly you've made 3rd and Elm Press a magic place as well, and invoking a lot of your background, both in Japan and just this whole artisan quality of the hands-on organic way you use the medium, which is quite beautiful. So thank you for giving us a glimpse into this absolutely beautiful studio on the Historic Point section of Newport. And if you would like more information about the Arts and Cultural Alliance of Newport County, its events, its upcoming events like Bridgefest, and more information about member artists and member businesses, please contact us by going to www.newportarts.org. This is Cris McCullough for ArtView. Thank you.
coming out and the Commonwealth people. They're so passionate and appreciate that. So this is Bones Hillman here and Tim Carroll. We're going to take a little bit further. Times are tough in rock and roll. It can't be bought, it can't be sold. 1,000 lives are getting told, 'cause times are tough in rock and roll. I keep on walking my country mile. I got my head up on the wall. It's only like grip my style, so I keep on walking my country mile. Reason is to feel this way, rough and stuff, this scene is staying. All my feelings were covered with Britney Spears. Me and the boys are in the band, and where I sit in the straight ladder, we're not in the hip of the break, 'cause ain't nobody getting back. I keep on walking my country mile. I got my head up on the wall. It's somewhat like grip my style, so I keep on walking my country mile. These times are tough in rock and roll. There can't be bought, I can't be sold. There's 1,000 lives get told, 'cause times are tough in rock and roll, baby. She asked for her mama's bathroom and a pot of potato soup. She gonna drive this town